I very much enjoyed the last major quote of Mr. Hoffman. And I'd like to actually put it out as a comment and maybe as a question to our panelists that we have a solution. We're going to be announcing Meat-Free Mondays, a campaign for Toronto, hopefully Canada. But we also have a program called the Veggie Challenge. It's something that people can do right now. I mean, we don't need to hear this and think of other people doing a vegetarian diet. Ideally, vegan diet is better, but it's something that we can do right now. We all have big families, potentially. Maybe I'm seeing an age range here. You have grandsons, granddaughters. You can be influencing an enormous amount of people and asking them to try a vegetarian diet. So you just need to check out veg.ca. And I'd like to ask the panelists, you know, if we know that this is the case, then are you actually going to do this yourself? Thank you.
We describe ourselves, Kathleen and I, as omnivores, but that's with a qualification in that there is no excuse for the industrial production of chickens, turkeys, fish, or beef. But there is a place, we were livestock farmers raising sheep and cattle on grass and grass finishing on land that you couldn't crop. So, but the manure went to the garden. I mean, we were looking at a whole ecological cycle or circle and back. And I think if we were to eliminate meat from everybody's diet, we would have some serious problems to deal with in terms of the diets in other societies and climates and so on. So I think it's very complex. And certainly, but I would say, I have not hesitate to say, forget the factory farming. It's a disaster. It's bad ecologically, morally, spiritually, and the sooner we can do away with it, the better. So in that sense, your suggestion is right on.
I've already confessed that I drove a car here. I confess as well that I do eat a little bit of red meat every now and then, but I'll mend my ways. I think Brewster's point, though, with respect to nutrient cycling is very important. That by and large, a huge problem has been the separation of animals into one heap over here and cropping into another heap over here. And so you get huge amounts of over-fertilization in one place that's damaging water and so on. The system doesn't make any sense at all, but that seems to be the outcome of industrial farming and the Green Revolution.
Just a very quick comment, because there's a lot of people that want to speak, but I've just moved back to Alberta, but I always lived in northern Alberta before, and now I live in the southern Alberta where there's a huge concentration of feedlots. And so the only way I would have gotten here is to fly. There's no train that would work, so there's no other way, and I couldn't run that way from southern Alberta here, so I did fly, I confess. But flying over and looking at those feedlots really could put anyone off the concept of being a meat eater. It's just shocking, and when the wind blows the right way, it really puts you off.
And that's the water component, which is a major issue in feedlots and so on.
The major factor that's going to affect productivity in the future is how much of the resources we actually still have are actually being used in agricultural production, as opposed to being taken away from that. Land taken away from agricultural production used to produce energy. Energy being used to run machines and computers and so on, rather than being used to power things that actually provide food or shelter. So it's true that we probably can't drastically alter the population curve very quickly. But the question of whether or not we end up with massive shortages of food and shelter is still something that will be determined by whether or not we continue to allow technology to expand. And if it does expand, it's going to reduce productivity, because the maintenance of the technological system continues to use more and more resources and actually reduces the productivity of what we are doing to provide food and shelter for ourselves.
The notion of taking land out of production reminds me of that Joni Mitchell song about big yellow cabin that pave in the parking lot. But it's evident. It's all across the country. We're taking a good agricultural land and building houses, McMansions all over it, and then people drive enormous ways into big cities like this one, using great volumes of energy, congesting the traffic, and you can't get anywhere. I asked a cab driver when I left Toronto 2 weeks ago, I asked the cab driver when the rush hour started, and he said about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It never really stops, but it's stop and go all the way to the airport from downtown Toronto. It's just crazy. So part of it is exactly our systems. We're doing a very poor job of making it easy for people to make the right decisions. That's the difficulty. So we can say, yeah, you shouldn't have driven here, you shouldn't have flown here. Well, what the heck are you going to do if there aren't other options? I mean, we really need to have institutional structures in place that prevent agricultural land from being paved over and make it more easy for people of moderate income to live in the heart of cities would be a good start.
My question has to do with the quality of the food that is being produced. And it is my understanding that between the trade deals and the chemical industry, the quality is diminishing. And an example of that is what's happened in Mexico, where the native corn production was very nutritious, but now they're having corn from the United States dumped on them, and that corn is not sufficiently nutritious.
The agreement, which Canada is part of course, to force open other economies to highly subsidize production, for example, in the U.S. And maybe you say, well, we don't subsidize the production of corn directly, but indirectly, it's a different issue altogether.
The point about quality of food is definitely interesting. There's all kinds of evidence that suggests that when we were eating food that was grown closer to the farm, we were eating better and getting more nutrition from packing in less calories, and that's true with actual produce, not just processed food. But again, I don't do research on that.